I went from playing in France in July to all of a sudden wearing a suit every day in October and figured it out. It didn't really feel like I had anything else. I probably had lots of other stuff, but at the time you don't know that. You've got to be able to modulate that as best you can. And so that self-awareness piece I think is really important.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, the first 3 chapters of my book are on self-awareness. Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. I'm your host, Erin Coupe, and today I am joined by Ryan Robertson, whose career journey has taken him from the basketball court to the boardroom. Before becoming a leader in the financial services industry, Ryan played professional basketball in the NBA with the Sacramento Kings and internationally across Europe. After his playing career, he transitioned into finance, building a successful career at firms like Goldman Sachs, and he now serves as managing director and co-head of U.S. distribution at Future Standard. Ryan brings a unique perspective on high performance, resilience, reinvention, and leadership. I'm so excited to explore the lessons that he's learned from both sports and business and how those experiences continue to shape the way he leads today. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Erin. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited.
I am too. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention SC Dub Forever. And it's for all my listeners. You can probably see us cracking up right now if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're just listening, Ryan and I actually went to the same high school, St. Charles West, and SC Dub is something that you'll never forget. A very special place to not only grow up in St. Charles, but that school was really, really special. What did it mean to you?
Yeah, it was, it was sort of some of the, as they say, cliche, but some of the greatest years of my life. I loved high school. I married my high school sweetheart. So I met my wife in high school, still stay in contact with a lot of my old teammates and coaches. So absolutely a huge part of my life. Absolutely something that I think about all the time. I still live in St. Charles, so I go by the high school from time to time, and very, very fond memories.
So many fun memories. I feel like for me, I don't know what it was, but you and I are a few years apart. I'm a little younger than you are, but I always knew your name in the area because, you went to Kansas to play basketball. That was a really big deal. You were such a great player that St. Charles was so proud of. And I know throughout my high school career, the athleticism of the students was like profound. And, every year we were in state if we weren't winning state in almost every sport. So you were obviously a big contributor to that. Now let's just start there. Take us back to the beginning. Growing up, you didn't grow up in St. Charles your whole life, but growing up, what did you imagine your future would look like? And was professional basketball a dream of yours?
Dream is a good word because I was just one of those kids that when I was young, the first time I went onto a basketball court, first grade, second grade, third grade, whatever, I just was like infatuated in love with the game and loved to play. And I daydreamed and thought all about everyday basketball. And did I then think to myself I would play in the NBA or play professionally? I don't think I was mature enough to kind of connect those dots, like I was just thinking how much fun I love to play and how much I couldn't wait to get to practice or how much I enjoyed, being out on the driveway or playing with friends. So I think, it at the very, baseline level, you just find something that you love and you're passionate about. And then it becomes sort of who you are. And that's really the way it was for me all the way through high school and even college. I just had such a passion for and loved my time on the court and playing a game that, it just became a really big part of my life and, thoroughly enjoyed all of my experiences. One thing I would say that I just want to correct you in your intro, you said that I played in the NBA. I mostly sat. I didn't really play. I did play, but mostly I just sat there. Now, when I went to Europe and I was living over there internationally, I played a lot. But
you were on the team. You were on the Kings.
Yeah. So and that was an incredible. Like playing at Kansas was an incredible experience. Being on the NBA roster was an incredible experience, and then living in Europe for 5 or 6 years, like all of those experiences were, obviously life changing, life developing, and I've used each one of those steps, like college, professional, Europe, to help me in my day-to-day role today. So really, really big part of my life, obviously.
Yeah. And I want to dive into all of what you just said about how much it helps you today as a leader and, a professional. But I really want to know, I guess first, let's just touch on Coach Roy Williams. I know that he's coached some incredible leaders in this world. What is something that he taught you that has like stuck with you, something that you can, continue to pay it forward with?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is like when you go, or at least for me, I'll speak just for me. I was 150, pound, senior in high school and got to college, and college athleticism and size and strength kind of hit me in the face. And one of the things that I had to understand very quickly was how challenging and hard things were going to be, and frankly, how tough I needed to be. Like it was a challenge physically every day. And so you learned over a course of 4 years that you were capable of a lot of things. So, I think that was a big lesson that I learned while I was there. But the other thing is he was very regimented and very sort of specific about what he wanted, very clear about what he wanted. And, if you weren't executing on exactly what he wanted in practice or in games,
Mm-hmm.
there was a negative consequence to that, or there was a feedback that you got about that immediately. And so that was a really also, I think, profound lesson. And that wasn't always easy. Like as you're a 19-year-old or 20-year-old kid playing, and you've got a Hall of Fame coach, and he has very, very high expectations and is incredibly demanding, that can be pressure packed and very, very hard. But I did learn that one of the lessons to get to, a successful basketball career or professional career is just the intensity and the clarity and the authenticity that he had about what he thought was important, and then our ability to execute on those thoughts and those priorities of his.
I feel like there's so many leadership lessons in that, which I will bring us back to as well, because I feel like, one of the things that you said about that direct and immediate feedback,
Yeah.
like leaders that don't do that are doing a disservice to not just themselves, but the entire team, because if someone knows, like, for example, you've got children, you're not going to wait for your 6-year-old to mess up and then 3 months later go, hey, remember when I don't know, cross the street without looking both ways? Don't do that anymore, because you're putting your life in danger.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. You're going to immediately, help them understand what it is they did wrong. And the same thing needs to happen in business, but it doesn't happen often enough. So I do want to touch on that in just a second, because I know we have a lot of leadership stuff that I want to get your perspective on. But real quick on the basketball front, I'm curious for you, what was that moment where you were like, oh, I could actually do this as a career, at least for a while? We all know it's not going to last forever, but what was that moment where you're like, oh, like there's something here? Yes, it was NBA first, and then it was overseas. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, I think when you get to Kansas and you're surrounded by, like, listen, my roommate in college was a guy by the name of Paul Pierce, and Paul is in the Hall of Fame and played for the Boston Celtics for 15 years and was one of their all-time leading scorers and players. And so being around great players, you start to think, well, can I compete or can I compare? And although I could never compare myself directly to somebody like a Paul Pierce or a Jacques Vaughn, who played in the NBA for a long time, or some of the other great players that I was able to play with, you are surrounded by that. And you do have the perspective that, hey, maybe I am good enough to compete at that type of level. And so I just think throughout my career, that development and confidence and mindset started to shift to say, hey, at some level, maybe not at the NBA level, but at some level, I could do this at a professional level. And by the way, it was still a passion. It was still something that I loved very, very much. And so when you have that, you're willing to maybe go, you know what, I'm going to give that a shot, no matter what that is. I'm going to give that a shot versus kind of throwing that dream away and going into XYZ field of sales or business or finance, whatever the story was, because it was still just a passion of mine and still something that I just loved to do.
Yes. Now, I know you and your wife moved overseas and you had your first child, and was it Greece?
It was. Yep.
Yeah. And so what was that transition like back to, I guess, the real world? So, away from basketball, and also now, moving into a next phase of your career, like you had to all of a sudden just kind of figure out, like, hey, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to raise a family.
Yep.
I'm going to be a provider. So what is that going to look like?
That was probably one of the more scary moments of my life because my identity and who I was and what I knew was basketball. But what I had promised my St. Charles West fiance, girlfriend, wife is that at the end of France and Holland and Greece and Italy, that we were going to move back to St. Charles where our families were and figure out what was next. And so, as these things happen, you have relationships and connections in all sorts of walks of life. And through my basketball connections, I had a friend who said, "Hey, I think you should talk to, this company or that company, because I think you'd be good in financial services." And one thing led to another. And that period of time where I started in financial services away from basketball was very sort of, a lot of anxiety, a lot of questions, because it was a world that I didn't know. And I had no idea whether or not that was something, one, I was going to like or be good at. And
Yeah.
so I dove in. I just dove in head first. And I went from, playing in France in July to all of a sudden wearing a suit every day in October, and figured it out. You just figured it out because I didn't really feel like I had anything else. I probably had lots of other stuff, but at the time you don't know that. And so you just, what was in front of me was this new world, this new job. And I just dove head first and figured it out.
Yeah. And, it's so funny because obviously you've met my husband, Craig, who played college basketball. And, there's so much to be said about athletes in business and a lot of the qualities of being a competitive athlete, especially on the college level, which not everyone makes it to. But being able to then translate some of those skill sets, those mindsets, those attitudes and behaviors into business.
Yeah.
And that's not something that everyone actually has, right? The grit, the perseverance, the
Yep.
ability to just to literally to compete at a level that most people can't even understand. So what are some of those qualities for you that have been like the most advantageous or that you feel like you've drawn upon the most in business?
Yeah, I mean, you said a couple of them, like it's the grit, the competitiveness, the knowing how to work and think smart and all that. But the thing for me that I've tried to take more than anything else throughout my career is this mindset of, and I did this I was as a point guard. And as a point guard, one of the things I did on the basketball court was I was always trying to make the people around me better. I was always trying to get them a better shot. I was always trying to get them a layup instead of the team taking a hard shot or a bad shot. And so this mindset that I call like servant leadership is where I serve the people that are really reporting to me, and I try and make their job as easy as possible, is really something that foundationally I believed in, as a basketball player and now as, an executive at Future Standard. Like my job truly is to figure out ways to make the job easier for all the people that work for me. And I feel like if I'm serving them and I'm doing my job with them, then ultimately better things will happen ultimately for the organization.
See, I love that you just mentioned that. I didn't even know you were going to mention that, of course, but I feel like so much of what you just said about servant leadership, like to me, it's about like being present, right? Like
Yeah.
truly bringing your whole self into the organization each and every day as a leader. And no, you're not going to be 100% every day, but you know when you're off and what you got to do about that. But if you show up from this whole place, this centered and grounded place, and you know that you are there to help that team be their best and
Yeah.
perform at their best, they're going to understand that that's what you're about. They're going to see that from you. They're going to watch you and they're going to want to emulate you. Whereas a lot of times in leadership, it's like almost like the opposite happens. And this is a historic thing that I feel like is changing, but certainly in the last couple of decades that you and I've, grown up in business in, and I saw this a lot at Goldman. And so I'm sure you did too. But the the leaders who show up from a place of authority and fear-based tactics and trying to squeeze as much out of people and make them as miserable as they need to be in order to feel like they have to perform or else, right? Like that kind of behavior just doesn't work in the long run. And by the way, no one wants to give a leader discretionary effort if that's how they're treating their people,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so what's your experience with, maybe you don't have to obviously name where or whatever, but like, have you had that kind of experience with other leadership? And do you ever see that and think, gosh, I'm so glad I've learned about this differently and that I do it differently.
Well, absolutely. I mean, coaches in sports use that tactic all the time, and God rest his soul. But the best example that I have of that, and I spent a little bit of time with him, not a lot, was Bobby Knight at Indiana, who was known for sort of his outrageous outbursts and his really demanding style. And you,
Mm.
you said it, that style actually can work. It just doesn't work for long periods of time. You can get somebody to do it for 3 or 4 years as a college kid. You could never be under that type of pressure for 10 years, 15 years, or at least even get and even be um, enjoy your time while you're doing it. So
Yes.
like is one example that sticks into my head. But more than anything is like just to continue, double click on this concept is I had one of my top sales people call me yesterday, and he ended the conversation. We were talking about something and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry you have to deal with this." And I said, "Don't be sorry. This is my job. Like dealing with what's bothering you is my job." So
Yeah.
I think more than anything that's sort of the guiding principle I've had throughout my career. And it was a principle that I took from basketball, where I was trying to be the best teammate I possibly could be to the people around me.
Yeah, I love that so much. I talk to my boys about this stuff a lot, right? Like being a leader on the court and, being a playmaker, like being someone who has the basketball IQ, who's able to, not just make good passes because it's the right thing to do and the play is there, but to be able to, to show up in that way for their teammates. And what's funny is I've got one son who's kind of selfish. And I mean, it's pretty darn obvious and he knows it, but we call him on it all the time, and trying to get him into this mindset is really, it's, as a parent, it's not easy, but trying to get him into the mindset where, like, when you help others be better and perform better on the court, you're actually helping yourself. Like, what would you say to people who, obviously my son is 12, so, totally different story than in business, but like, what would you say to people who maybe aren't there yet and don't really see their leadership style in that way?
Yeah, it's tough because I've dealt with people that who are leaders or executives who completely disagree with my servant leadership stance, and they reject the concept that the people that work for them, that's flipped on its head, that they refuse to view the world in that way. And you know I don't know what I would say to convince people otherwise. I would just simply say how, it's worked for me. It's
Right.
like it's worked for me. And I think you said something just about the basketball for 1 second is that I think kids or even even like older players and in business too, but like
Mhm.
when you stand out for doing something different, which is not always shooting or not always scoring, but you're the one that's the playmaker and you're the one that's helping everyone else, that actually stands out more than the person at the end of the game that had 20 points. And that's
Yeah.
been my whole career. I've been on teams where guys have scored 30, but yet I was the one that got the MVP for whatever reason. And it's because I was able to do and showcase their skills more than my own, and people recognize that. So,
Yeah.
if you do that in business as well, if I'm able to do that with my colleagues at Future Standard, again, I think the organization wins
Yeah.
more than the individual, but because the organization is winning, we all win.
Absolutely. And it's like being able to help other people understand, like, what's in it for them,
Yeah,
because when it's not all about you, it, it becomes obvious what's in it for them, and you actually don't even have to explicitly say it.
yeah,
But
sure.
when it is all about you, you don't have to explicitly say that either, but people absolutely glob onto that. And then that's where, like, the gossip and the friction and the tension and all those other issues from a performance perspective really set in. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you highlighted that. And clearly that, Future Standards lucky to have you as a leader. That's for sure.
Oh, well, thanks.
Um, so a question for you then, when you think about pressure and operating under pressure, which you've done, in basketball for a very long time, but you've obviously done this in business too, what do these environments, both of them, they have a lot in common, but they also differ. What do they get right, but also get wrong about high performance?
Um, I think it's a great question. I think it comes down to, you know, there's only so much time in the day. As your responsibilities grow, you start to realize that time and energy are sort of a scarce resource. And so the idea that I'm the busiest person at the firm, or that I'm the busiest person at practice, although hard work is different than being busy, and hard work, I don't think, you can ever shortcut success. Like, I think hard work is sort of table stakes, but the question becomes less about like what can be fit on my calendar and more about what deserves my best attention. And so this concept of time and energy, I'll go through a day where I'm incredibly busy, and I'll get to 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and I realize very quickly that I'm done. Like, there's nothing more than I can't open my inbox. I can't do anything else because I just don't have the energy to dive into a project that really needs me. And so as long as during the course of that 6 a.m. to 5 or whatever time frame that I was working, if I was putting my energy and time into the projects that were most important and most valuable, then I feel like we had a successful day. And so I don't know if that
Right.
really answers your question, but
No, it definitely
for
does.
me, understanding how to spend my time and where to put my energy is become a really important sort of characteristic that I try and think about.
I love that. And I'm such a big believer in energy stewardship. And, people are always talking about time management. And it's like, no, like everyone has 24 hours in a day. So you're never going to get more. So understanding that, right? And that, yes, the clock is ticking, but you never know when you're leaving this earth. So just make the most of what you have in front of you. Being able to look past distractions and stay focused where you want to, when you want to, and how you want to, like that's up to you, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have agency over ourselves and where we give that attention. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And it's actually a great transition into talking a little bit more about like your own kind of daily rituals or practices or how you stay grounded and centered. Like, what does that look like for you?
Um, so I'm not like I don't have this hardcore health regimen anymore where I'm in the gym, for 2 hours and killing myself. But I do feel like my day needs to start with a workout. Like, I'm just one of those people that functions better with a workout in the morning, where, again, other people are different. Like, my wife likes to do it at the end of the day, but I just feel like it gets my blood flowing, my juices flowing, and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
brain stimulated for the day, and energizes me more than it does drain me. So, one of those important rituals is sort of a good workout in the morning. My faith is very important to me, so spend time in the Word and prayer. But I just I try and be very purposeful too with my day. Like, I try and the night before or the very early in the morning, look at what my day is going to be, and strategically start to put that into compartments of how I need to attack the day. And so,
Mhm.
I don't think that's, I'm a big yoga guy. I love to run, love to lift, don't play basketball anymore, love to play golf, and all of those things are fun. But I mean, from a ritual standpoint, that workout early in the morning just stimulates me and gets my brain going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel the same way. And it's funny you say I don't play basketball anymore. I remember probably like 5 years ago, Craig played one night like a pickup game that someone asked him if he could kind of fill in a spot. And he came home with like scratches like on his
Yeah.
neck and like his shoulders and his elbows. I'm like, I don't think you can do this anymore. And I'm like, and
Yeah.
those men need to cut their nails.
Yeah. Like, I 5 years ago, I was playing in like this national basketball, over 40 league, and it was very, very competitive, and it was once a year, and it was a lot of fun. But for 2 or 3 years and consecutively, I was coming home with an injury. And my last year, I sprained my ankle pretty bad, and then the next day I needed to be in New York in a suit, and I've got a cane, and I'm like, what am I doing? What are we doing
Yes.
here? Like, it's over. So
That's
just,
hilarious.
there's no upside anymore. So I try and stick to things like I said, yoga and golf.
Right, right. So clearly your definition of ambition when it comes to sports has probably changed over time as far as your own practices.
Yeah.
What else would you say has changed as far as how you define, ambition and success for yourself, especially, since basketball?
Yeah. Well, not to harbor on this, but it probably used to be in my life about cramming as much as I could into a day, or promotion or what's the next opportunity or what's around the corner and all those, like promotion and recognition and compensation, like those things are important. Like, I think everybody has a level of what that's important, but I still go back to what impact am I making on a day-to-day basis with the people that I'm around? And am I leading in a way that's resonating with the group that I need to lead with? To me, I won't sleep at night if I feel like the people around me either I'm not resonating with them, or more importantly, if they don't respect me. Like what a awful place to be where you can't connect with the people that you're supposed to be leading. And so to me, today, what's more important is really about making sure that what I am saying and what I believe in is also resonating to the people around me and that they believe in the same things.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel you on that one, that like your success and your own fulfillment is based on how others experience you.
Yeah,
Right. And
sure.
like, what is your legacy? Yes, it's your family and what you're leaving behind and, the generations to come. But it's also like, how do people feel in your presence? And like, what would they say about you when you're not in the room?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
what will they say about you 2 weeks from now? And I think about that a lot in the work that I do. And I thought about this in my corporate years too, but like, how do I want people to leave this room feeling about me? Because like that matters to me, and I don't think that will ever not matter to me. Like, I will never go into like Starbucks and treat someone poorly because they made my coffee wrong.
Sure.
Am I going to correct my coffee? Of course. But like, I'm not going to like degrade somebody or demoralize them just because like it's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I always think about that. Like, success is literally what presence you're bringing to what you're doing. It's not like how much of it you're doing, and it's not how much you crammed in, and it's not like, did you make it to like the CEO of the Fortune 500? It's like each and every day, like, did you give it what you had? And did you help people like at least feel your presence in a way that was positive,
Yeah.
and not negative?
Yeah. I've always said that I think sometimes people's biggest weaknesses are their biggest strengths and their biggest strengths are their biggest weaknesses. And so, for example, I tend to be a people pleaser though. And I also tend to worry a little bit too much. And, um, you know, because of that though, I have probably driven myself to a place where I have been successful, but moderating that and understanding what's healthy or not healthy has also, really, really helped me. And it's that self-awareness that I think
Mhm.
you've got to have, that you don't use that drive, we'll call it, that then drives people around you crazy. And so you've got to be able to moderate that and modulate that as best you can. And so that self-awareness piece, I think, is really important.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, the first 3 chapters of my book are on self-awareness. And it's so funny because I feel like I was so not self-aware until I really started to actually practice it. And people don't really know you can develop that, but it's like you're not just born with it,
Yeah.
It's just like confidence. Like, you're not just born confident. Like, you have to develop that by putting yourself in tough situations that you learn from and grow from, and you have to fail and make mistakes in order to become more confident in whatever it is that you failed in, right?
Well, and
So really, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt but you
No.
said you just to go back to one thing you said at the beginning about
Yeah.
feedback. The Venn diagram of St. Charles West and Goldman Sachs has got to be very small. So you and I are probably a very small percentage of people that were at St. Charles West and at Goldman Sachs. But one of the things about Goldman is that it's a firm of feedback, and you had to be comfortable with getting feedback. And I do think that that's one of the things that can help you become more self-aware, because you may have a vision of what you think you just did or a vision of how you are. But when you have 2, 3, 4, 5 colleagues around you go, well, actually, this could have been better. It does help you not only from a self-awareness perspective, but it also can help you with your confidence. So anyways,
That's so true.
I do like, although it's not always pleasant, but I've tried to also employ this view of a firm of feedback even at Future Standard, because I think feedback can be so healthy to the people that you work with.
That is so true.
As long as it's done in, a respectful, constructive way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the years I was at Goldman in New York, when I was there, I remember, I mean, this is in like 2004, 5. Um, First of all, I reported to someone who was just terrible. Like she was awful. And to a lot of us, not just to me.
Yeah.
But those were the years of the 360
Yeah.
that was done once a year.
Yep.
And it would take like 2 months to go through this process because you chose who reviewed you and you had to choose X amount of people that were superior to you, X amount that were your peers, and X amount that, reported into you or were junior to you. And I remember, my role was servicing internal clients. So I was managing market data for the securities division. So like I had all these internal clients on like the trading floor and across the investment bank. And I thought, oh, I know what I'm going to do. And this is like, the 24-year-old me. I was like, I am going to ask as many people as possible to review me. And then that way I can make sure that like they know I'm going to see these, right? So I can make sure that like when I ask them, like it's people that I like and that and I know like me and that I've gotten great remarks from before. So then of course I thought like it's going to make my number really high. And sure enough, I mean, I think one year, my second year there, I got like 33 reviews. I mean, it was insane. And they were phenomenal. And I still got like, I think the top number was a 5. I still got a 4. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, do you not see all of this? But what I realized is like that was just an environment, a culture that would never give out 5s.
No.
Right.
Right.
Because they're even with top performers, they're always going to tell you you've got room to improve, which in reality, you do. We all do every single day, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like no one's perfect. There's always room for improvement. But I just remember thinking like, I'm going to beat this system and I'm going to get a 5. And
There,
it
there's
didn't
all
work.
these unwritten rules of the Goldman 360 review that nobody tells you until like after the fact. So like
Right?
I got my manager one time said, well, you can't, you're scoring too rough. Like you can't give somebody a 1, they'll get fired. I'm like, really? So I didn't know. Like you got to let me know these things. I didn't know.
Right. Yeah. I wish I could have given my boss a 1.
Yeah.
I was too scared. I figured, you know what? They say it's autonomous. It's really not.
No, I know.
Well, that's just too funny. So if you, I guess, as we start to kind of think about closing out here, if there was a piece of advice that you were to give someone who maybe is considering like transition in their career, which you obviously have done and done it well, or even just considering like reinvention within their own industry, maybe moving companies or, trying to move into leadership, what is a piece of advice you might give them?
I have this conversation all the time because I have lots of young people that I oversee and lots of different opportunities come their way, either internally or externally. Um, you know, this is going to sound so basic, but it's just the way I've always done it. And I write down a pros and cons list. I say, well, tell me about the opportunity. What do you think is really good about it? What is a negative? And then let's compare that to what you have now and where you sit now. And let's look at that list and break it down. I think writing it down and thinking about it from a very logical perspective is what I've always done and used successfully. Like I never thought I would leave Goldman Sachs. And, it sounds like I'm sure you had a lot of respect for the firm, but a difficult manager. I loved my time there, loved every second of it, never thought I'd leave. And very similar to basketball, where in July I was playing in France. In October I was wearing a suit. Like in, I don't know, 2017 I was at Goldman, and at the end of 2017 I was at Future Standard. I would have lost a lot of money if you ever would have told me that. And it was just a function of weighing the pros and cons of what I thought was ultimately going to be best for me and my family and the people around me and my development. And all of those things played out. So again, very, very simplistic, not groundbreaking, but it's always historically worked for me. And that's the advice I typically give the people around me.
Yeah. And, one of the things that comes to mind listening to you is that, I mean, you said this earlier, but like you can figure everything out for one, so don't go crazy, don't spiral, like understand that like you are going to figure it out and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And also that like reinvention is always possible. Like
Yeah.
it really, really is. And especially if you're passionate about something. I mean, last night, so I belong to the Chief Network, which is like a female executive network. And they have a location in Chicago. That's a clubhouse in the Fulton Market. But then they host events around, the area. And I live on the North Shore. So there was a North Shore event in Lake Forest. And I show up at this event. It's at this really nice farm that's kind of like a, I don't know, they have farmers markets, and you can bring your children there to pet animals and that stuff. And this event was hosted by Chief and this woman named Babs. Babs is like a former like Big Four accountant, and she's like around our age range, mid to late 40s. And she has invented a business that started out as a charcuterie board business where she actually made boards and people bought them, and she like delivered them to parties. And then she started teaching people how to make their own. And she realized, like, gosh, I'm asked to do this a lot. I'm going to do it. And then realized she loves teaching. So now she no longer does that. But what she does is she teaches grilling to women. And so I was at a grilling class for women, and I learned that your grill is just your outdoor oven. And I'm like, oh, that makes it far less intimidating. And now I can use this all summer long and not be scared of it. And it was so funny because I was just thinking about this topic and knowing that you and I were chatting today. I'm like reinvention really is always available. It might not be easy,
Yeah.
and certainly it might not always be obvious, and it's going to take a lot of hard work, but what doesn't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think it's a function of what's important to you and a function of how much time and energy you want to put into something new and different. And, so
Yeah.
I could go on about sort of that weave that in a lot of different ways, but I think what you just said is very true.
Yeah. And what would you say, Ryan, as we close out, what are you intentionally prioritizing at this point in your life?
So I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 in college. I've got 1 at home who's a sophomore in high school. So he's, we're 3 years away from being empty nesters. So, I've always done I've traveled for a living. That's good and bad. But one of the things I've been able to do is I've been able to manage my travel. So I get to pick and choose where I need to go. And I can honestly tell you that in my career, I've never missed a game that I needed to be at or wanted to be at, one, with the exception of once. There was one that I just couldn't miss a work thing and had to watch a game on my phone while I was at the meeting. So I prioritize my kids' activities and events so that I don't miss that. However, I am getting ready to take on a new world where in 3 years, my wife and I are going to be empty nesters. So I live in St. Louis still, St. Charles still. And for me, in 2 or 3 years, could I live in New York City? Could I live in San Francisco? Could I live in, Charlotte, if need be, which is a whole nother sort of dynamic and opens up a whole nother world that maybe I'm not living today. But to answer your question, my priority has always been sort of what's important to my family and how can I best do both things? How can I be the ultimate self at work and my ultimate self at home? And I try and do that as best I can. But this work-life balance thing is really, I'm not sure anyone can perfect it, but I'm doing my absolute best to make sure that I give my workers my absolute best and my home life my absolute best.
Yeah. Well, you're integrating all of it, right? It's like the balance thing is a myth, but certainly the integration is there.
Yeah.
And you can tell when someone lives and breathes that by the way that they show up, whether they're showing up with their family, they're showing up with their community, their friends, their colleagues, like you can tell the people who actually like walk the walk or, those that just talk or actually don't even care, which there's plenty of them too.
Yeah.
They don't have a place on this show though.
No.
Well, this has been obviously just so much fun having you on and reconnecting with a St. Charles West alum who has gone on to do amazing things. Before we reconnected through Craig, I didn't realize we had so much in common through Goldman and all. So it's super, super cool to have you on the show and to reconnect with you in this way.
Well, I've really enjoyed the time. I wish you nothing but the best with the book and the podcast and everything you're doing. So it was a real pleasure, Erin.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And everyone, you know what to do. Please like, share, subscribe, rate the show, and let's get this out to more and more listeners who will benefit from it. And until next time, be well.